Good morning, Claire, and thank you very much for giving time to speak to the Mint.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I was wondering if I could start by asking you what drew you initially in to get involved in the food sector, because I believe it's now 30 odd years. So going back, what sparked your interest? What brought you into it?
Yeah, I thought about this recently as I was asked actually in an interview that I did for Jelly Deal, and
This must be the standard question.
and it's a funny one, but so I did want to do something where I thought I was doing something for public positive good, and I'd actually looked at social work.
All right.
And at that time, it wasn't funded as a full degree. And then I thought again, I was only 18.
Right.
I thought I really wanted to be somewhere where people were having fun. So I got into food.
Food is fun.
Well, restaurants and things like that,
Yeah.
and food, and as a way of bringing people together. So I did my degree in hotel catering management for that reason.
And did it live up to actually, you thought it was going to be fun? Was it as much fun as you thought it was going to be?
Well, I think, working in food is amazing, and I love it, and I love it every day. I've had things happen this week that just make me love what food is and what it's a conduit for. But
what do you mean by a conduit for?
Well, it brings people together.
Yeah.
It's a way of celebrating culture. I find food is a really good way for people to celebrate their identity. And, it's an art form that's really accessible for a lot of people to practice.
Yeah.
And I see that, the work I do at GCJ, we see a lot of that. But when I was doing my degree, I had a particular lecturer, and he started talking about the social responsibility of catering and the role food played. And we studied physiology and nutrition, but it was during the early days of the London Lighthouse and HIV, and how important diet was in terms of tackling AIDS and those illnesses. And we just started looking at the environmental and health impact of food, and it just completely caught my imagination. And that, combined with the way I'd been brought up, parents that grew a lot of their own food, made a lot of their own food, and their kind of belief system, that just resonated with me completely.
So where was it actually that you were brought up? Is it country?
In New Forest, on the edge of the New Forest. But my dad had 2 allotments that were committed to food growing, and the back garden was soft fruit. Well, I'm one of 5, and my parents had low income, so everything was homemade. But they had kind of high values,
Yeah.
So everything was homemade, really good quality, but our clothes were homemade, our furniture, even our TV. Actually, my dad made. He was an instrument.
Your TV was homemade. That's quite something.
Yeah. Well, he was an instrument fitter, so he put together our TV that used to flash on and off when there was a big fight scene. But it just was a really good way to be taught to have quite a high quality of life, but not around money, but more about how my parents did things.
So were you a child? Were you a sort of allotment child, and the Saturday it's out to the front of the allotment?
There was quite a lot of time.
But it's quite a nice environment.
Yeah. Well, there's a smell from those hot kind of days on the allotment that I can get that smell sometimes, and it takes me back to the allotment and collecting water from the, and listening to the collecting water from the water vat and helping my dad. It just takes me back, and it was just glorious.
Yeah.
He used to work nights, so it wasn't weekends though. It would have been evening, so he quite often worked at weekends. Would have been other times that we would have been there.
Right.
But really lovely.
And once you got into the serious business of the food sector, what's been your favourite time or job while you've been working in the food sector?
Well, what I do now, I love. I really love it because it's incredibly broad, from the kind of role with the mayor and that strategic policy role, and actually because of what London's doing, being able to really set a precedent potentially for the rest of the UK and the world. I mean, some of the stuff we've been able to do, and what's been a real pleasure about that for me is projects that I do on the ground, what I've learned from working in communities in Woolwich and places of high deprivation, and being able to translate that into how a policy or a strategy can really support that. That's what I really, really love. But I loved having a pub. I had a pub in Deptford.
You ran a pub, did you?
Yeah, I became bankrupt as a result. but having a pub was amazing. And that place for people making connections, meeting new people, and And Deptford was quite hardcore in those days. That was like
And was it
nearly
very,
30 years ago.
nearly 30 years ago? And was it a very sort of male-dominated environment, or did you manage to change that? Or?
Yeah, no, I think we changed it, and it was a place where women would come in as a woman who could go out for a drink by herself.
Single woman?
Yeah. So that was quite good. And what you do is that when you're at the bar, there'd be someone at one end, and you'd make sure you got a conversation going, because you'd refer to them in first person, and they'd make friends. I know people that are married from meeting in that pub. Loads of bands that we launched in that pub that are semi-famous or famous now. And yeah, that's really enjoyable. And that's the thing about food that's really enjoyable. It's the people that meet each other and have this shared thing. So when I start my food business course, and I've got a new cohort, and 2 weeks ago I started it, and you go around the room, and the first week I say, I want to know why you're doing this, because it's about you, and you're unique, and it's all about you, and that will make your business unique.
Yeah.
Make it about you, and it will also mean and what you want to achieve, your personal and professional values. And they start telling their stories, and it's untrue.
Yeah.
You know, a guy that's been in gangs that wants to create opportunities for people to come out of gangs in Woolwich and Plumstead. A woman who was from the Romanian community said that we suffer real self-esteem issues in London. I want to do something where we can gather and celebrate our culture. A woman who'd set up a business with someone, and then the other person had kind of not really engaged, and it exhausted her, and she'd lost all her money. And she was crying in the first session, and by the end of the session, they've all kind of bonded, and they're unusual. You know, I've got 2 people on that course that are hearing impaired, and I've got a signer, which is also adding, and they want to set up a market stall for people that have got hearing loss, vegan. I mean, and then the way they connect with each other, and they're very, very diverse, ethnically, age, everything.
Wow. And what is it, and particularly the fact that you work in you run a cooperative development agency, as opposed to, say, supporting the private sector, how does that bring a different angle as well?
So, I guess the Cooperative Development Agency is about social inclusion and equality, and that is at the heart of a lot of what we do. So just firstly, the way we work as an organisation, we're really flat structured, which means that because you're listening to your colleagues all the time, and the way you make decisions is very collective and collaborative, it makes you probably better informed, maybe better at what you do. You're learning all the time, and so that's one side of it. But the other side of the way we work is that we encourage that in the way we teach and the way we work. And I mean, I think the independent food sector in London is very collaborative and very cooperative from what I've seen, the way people share and work together. But I think we really embed that in what we teach. So these people will become individual businesses, but the kind of our values that we embed. Yeah. So I mean, because of the values of GCDA, because of everything, we kind of cover sustainability in the second week of the course, and we cover it so that they then embed it throughout the rest of the course. And the sustainability is social, economic, and environment. And yeah, I talk to them about slavery in prawn fishing and agriculture. I talk to them about breastfeeding, and it's really broad, but I mean, it's a really brilliant thing for their own personal kind of knowledge, and equally really valuable for their business. And we know economically that if you have a more sustainable food business, you don't waste food, you get your portions right, it's plant-based the majority, you don't waste energy, you reduce your packaging. All of this is really good in terms of economic, sustainability and financial performance. It really captivates people, and but they're quite shocked. They're shocked at sometimes their lack of knowledge. They feel it. Last week particularly, sometimes I have people that know quite a lot, but I had this guy actually at the end of last week saying, I thought I knew a lot, and I've learned quite a lot from today. So that's really good. Yeah.
And as you say, there are so many issues and dimensions to food, aren't there? But if you were asked to pick one issue, the sort of the biggest challenge we face at the moment, what would it be?
So I've always said there isn't one. Ever until recently, and now when I'm asked what's the one, I'm saying infant feeding. So if you look at the World Health Organization's assessments on the cost of poor infant feeding in terms of GDP, if you want to measure it on those things, so good infant feeding means good maternal development, good maternal health, good child health. We've seen the reductions in baby illnesses in pilots in Tower Hamlets as a result of breastfeeding, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. There's the kind of brain development.
And this is all about breastfeeding, is it?
Well,
really?
there's breastfeeding,
yeah.
and then there's appropriate introduction of solids.
Right.
Now, it's controversial, but if we want people to want a healthy, sustainable, handmade food, giving a plastic tube to a 6-month-old baby and saying that's food is a terrible way to introduce food. If we want people to eat a diet that's, wholesome and homemade, why are we letting them suck on plastic from when they're 6 months old? And why are we allowing in this country food to be marketed as vegetables, and it will say something like broccoli, bean and apple, and the biggest ingredient is apple, and yet that's not allowed in America, and we are promoting soft sweet food to really young children and it costs loads of money, and there's loads of packaging waste.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is not empowering people to make affordable, sustainable food at home that a child will eat with a spoon. And I think it's atrocious, and I would like to see a lot more done to support a healthy infant feeding environment, and save people money. So if we're talking about sustainability and poverty, the best way to feed a baby that's most affordable, most sustainable and better for our health is breastfed, and then mashed potato, a bit of broccoli, white beans.
Yeah.
Costs nothing. Absolutely costs nothing.
What about currently obviously we have Extinction Rebellion, we have the climate change strikers, and if you go on to the BBC website, I believe, or something like that, and say on the list of things you can do, the top one is generally to move to a plant-based diet, or give up both meat and dairy, and the and dairy of course is the tricky, and that seems like a huge change that's sort of required, and I was just wondering, where does that sit on your list of challenging issues that of the moment?
We've been talking about combining the healthy and sustainable messages on food since 2007 at GCJ, and the reason we've been able to do that so easily is we use the Eat Well plate, which is the kind of SACAM public health recommendations on diet, which have been the same more or less for 40 years. I mean, I say that because, you get all the trends around superfoods and all of this. And when we teach, we always say, actually, main recommendations have been the same for about 40 years. But if you look at that, over two-thirds of the Eat Well plate is plant-based. It's either starchy foods, high in grain ideally, and fruit and veg. So in terms of a plant-based diet, we probably should all have about 80% plant-based diet anyway.
Or more. I mean, I'd understood that some Oxford research, that actually one portion of meat a week is, any more is probably bad for you, healthy and bad for the environment. Well,
public health says 500 grams, so that's only 80 grams a day. If you turn that into a steak, it just doesn't work. So the proteins can come from beans or alternatives. So so you can have a healthy diet that's plant-based, but even before that, even before talking about vegan and plant-based diet, if all of our diets were 80-90% plant-based, that would be significant in itself. But what we've found now, teaching this for 10-12 years, is that every course I run now, 30-40% of people are vegan.
Right.
30-40% of people are saying, I'm going to make it a plant-based business. And the course before last, I had 2 guys that wanted to do chicken wings. We say, okay, do your market research, but look at global trends, look at what's happening, and find out about it. And after week 2, the sustainability week, one of the guys dropped out, actually, and one guy said, I've gone vegan. And he'd watched the films, and actually that was more to do with animal farming.
Right.
And he was doing cauliflower wings and vegetable wings, and he'd converted to vegan. It's the biggest change I've ever seen, and it's so dramatic, and it's becoming very mainstream and very accessible and very normal. I've got a sister who's been vegan for 27 years, and it's been a big part of how I've eaten for years. I shared a house with her for years, but now it's just mainstream.
But there's still, obviously there's still a lot, must be majority, well over the majority, are serious meat eaters. And also, of course, we have a huge industry, livestock industry.
Yeah.
So moving it, it may be, obviously, you spend a lot more time with the sort of people who are probably vegan in that space.
Yeah.
But the huge majority out there are going to be meat eaters at the moment, and also there's all the farmers whose livelihood depends on livestock.
Yeah.
So that's,
I think
moving away from that's pretty big, isn't it?
I mean, I think reduction is a really good idea.
Sorry, say that again?
Reduction.
Yeah.
And also there's really well farmed meat in mixed environment, that's outdoor reared, which costs a lot more money, possibly.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you can reduce the meat, have a higher quality meat with better farming methods where you pay more, because meat should not be cheap. It should not be cheap. And the idea that we need cheap meat. And so what we say to people is reduce the amount of meat. So in a restaurant or in your diet, reduce the amount of meat you're eating, which meets health and environmental kind of needs, but also spend more money on it then and buy a much higher quality piece of meat directly from a producer. Form a relationship with your farmer. With your butcher, But with your farmer, ideally. Go and see how the animals are produced. Have a relationship with it. Understand where it comes from. It's that demand or that expectation or that creation of an expectation of cheap, poor quality food.
That is a standard thing, isn't it?
That's something we've done for a long time.
But I was looking at the London food strategy, and I was surprised that there wasn't really anything in there about moving to a plant-based diet that I could see. There wasn't any that it wasn't up there in lights or anything. There was environment was sort of in there, but in terms of if the urgency of the climate change problem and the need for dramatic change and a huge change in diet, that it wasn't sort of it mentioned much.
It is in there because it talks
you'll
about
look for it sort of on the edges.
It says about reducing meat and dairy. I think in the first chapter, and we talk about sustainable and
you talk about sustainable in the round and so forth. But I suppose I just sort of expect it to have more prominence, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good point. I think what we're really interested in is more of a sustainable diet, and better reared meat. So if you look at the Highlands of Scotland, if you look at the mountains in Wales, then that is a good place to breed meat. And I think. Well, actually, yeah. What can grow? Have you been up those mountains in Wales?
I have.
Yeah.
But
you wouldn't be able to grow much more up there.
I know, but people do write. Actually, George Monbiot, of course, is a big writer in this area about
and then they'll
the disaster,
say deforestation,
the effects on flooding, on catchments.
Yeah, it's true.
That it's actually a hugely degraded environment.
Actually,
due to overstocking.
I saw that. I did see that about. Because you assume that the environment's always looked like that, but the environment looks like that because of sheep.
It's ecologically, it's an ecological disaster.
And we have people like the Lake District as well. We have all those big kind of herds of sheep. Yeah. And I guess the thing is that
deer in Scotland, deer are a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the answer is that we just need to help people change their businesses and help people kind of. Because if we're going to move farming to more plant-based, and I've been a vegetarian for 34 years, and I'm now more or less plant-based. I don't buy certain things anymore. It's definitely a big part of how I live, but I guess with the London food strategy, it was about something that was accessible, that we can take people on the journey. We hadn't written one for 10 years, and actually we wrote it 2 years ago, and maybe it would have felt not accessible if we'd put that in it. We just need to take people on a journey. Maybe we would have closed more doors than we could open. And, as we talk about things now, we'll be talking more in that language because it's more accessible and it's more acceptable, and other people are talking about it. Because we talked about a healthy and sustainable diet 10 years ago when we wrote the strategy.
Yeah.
But I think I take your point, but I think it's just not where we were with that strategy, or how we could have. I don't know that we could have said that at that time.
So do you think now, with the recent, I suppose, growth in awareness around climate change and, the Extinction Rebellion and so forth, there is a chance for a more challenging conversation in that space?
I think that conversation's happening, and when we talk to restaurants, when we talk to Sustainable Restaurant Association, with all the programs we're doing, we've always said more plant-based. It's not something we haven't said, but whether we say to people your diet has to be plant-based, I just don't know whether we'll get that with that. There are cultural issues. It's not just habit. There are big cultural issues around diet and meat and things, and I just think we need to take people on a journey, and I think they're going on a journey.
And what do you think about these new sort of pseudo meats that you bite into and sort of feel bloody and give a sort of a meat feel?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fancy that. I mean, I didn't give
But you've been a vegetarian for a very long time, but for others starting the journey...
Well, and you meet people that go, why do vegetarians want sausage? And it's like, well, because they want the texture and the flavour, but they don't want to, either have the environmental impact or the health or the animal welfare issue. So I completely get why people want that. And it's just another product. I guess it depends what's required to create that product. I mean, we've got corn, which is a mushroom, isn't it? And then we've got tofu, which comes from soya, and how the soya is farmed. So, I mean, ideally, we just eat plants, but we live in a world where we've got amazing technology, and we want to create new product, and we're always looking for new businesses. So people are always going to be looking at the high tech. I mean, food tech is such a big thing, and people grasping it's got to be the next thing. So there'll always be that.
And what about vegan cheese? Have you ever come across a good vegan cheese?
Yes, I have.
Right. Whereabouts?
Crystal Palace Farmers Market. And it was like a brie. But I've had a few of the nut tree cheeses, and they're extraordinary. But, in terms of sustainability, you have to run the water for ages. And they use a lot of embedded water. So I think they're nice for a treat.
Right.
And maybe the thing that we need to think of is like chocolate. It's got really massive environmental impact, hasn't it? And whiskey, olives. I mean, they're one of the biggest water users. So I think we just need to think about the balance in those ways. We don't want to move from no meat, no kind of outdoor reared British meat, and go to only chocolate, whiskey, and olives or nut cheeses. But I've had some really good nut cheeses.
Okay. And London, I mean, how can London lead the way, do you think? Does it see itself as a potential leader?
I think London is a leader.
Why? What way?
Well, I think London has done... I mean, the fact that it was one of the early sustainable food cities, because I think sustainable food cities is a brilliant model, and I think looking at cities as the place where sustainability around food has to happen, because the majority of the world now live in cities, because we are the consumers, we're the ones that make the rubbish, we use all the resources. We have to be the place where changes happen. We have to.
And in London, where should I go to find the future of food? Right? Where is the bits of the sustainability future living in London?
Well, there's some. I think the way to look at it is, if you want to look at London, you've either got some of the stuff the mayor's doing around all different things around food, but banning advertising of unhealthy food just to support those messages.
He do that?
He did it on TfL.
Right. In TfL,
because he controls TfL.
Yeah.
That's a really significant message. And people will argue about advertising, the impact of advertising, but it's a message to say, the public have said, stop, advertising this stuff at us, or stop putting us under this pressure, give us some protection from this. And there's been a response, and I think that's incredibly powerful, and I think other cities will follow suit. But also, I think another place to look is how the boroughs are working. So boroughs that are supporting food growing, supporting breastfeeding, supporting the London Living Wage, supporting friendly funding, say the funding only goes to people that pay London Living Wage, supporting work with takeaways, helping incubate new food businesses, creating new street markets, looking at how they procure the food that they buy on behalf of the borough, looking at who they commission and contract. The boroughs are doing extraordinary things. And a lot of them, as much as they possibly can, to impact on the food that they buy, that they create. So London, the boroughs have loads of roles around trading standards, environmental health, planning, so they have this economic development. So they can do a huge amount, and then the mayor, in terms of growth funds, can do a lot. So now where the mayor is putting funding into business incubation, we in the food team and the London Food Board go, right, when we're incubating new food businesses, let's say what a good food business is. Let's not incubate new food businesses that don't pay London living wage, that aren't good employers, that aren't going to be healthy, sustainable food businesses. If the mayor's putting money into something, if boroughs are putting money into something, let's say we just want to create good food businesses.
So is it conditioned to access these funding? Do you have to meet these conditions?
Well, that's something that I want the Food Board and the Food Unit to really lead on at the GLA. So the GLA are already kind of looking at the good employee standard, which they're launching very soon, which is really brilliant. But yes, I mean, we want to look at a kind of charter for kind of food business incubation hub. So it's just something we're talking about now. So it's about the food team, the economic development team, but there are already food hubs in London that potentially would like to pilot this. And I think if we support the creation of new good food businesses and then help convert existing food businesses, that's a long way to...
And what about the businesses that have a social purpose, that actually businesses that get support from the state should have a public perspective and public
Absolutely,
objectives?
Definitely. I think any business that's getting support from the state shouldn't then be contradicting what we require them to do for the better of the state and the country. So yes, if they're getting funding, then we need all of the food that's produced through those routes, or funded or subsidised or part of that, to be good for people, good for the environment. And that means that they have to pay people properly, the food has to be healthy, and it has to be sustainable, the environment needs to be right. It's a quick win though.
Yeah.
What we know is if you're procuring something and people are competing for that, get it right there. So when the mayor's putting on an event and we were asked to put in specifications for events, so if someone wants to apply to put an event on in Trafalgar Square, it's the mayor's event, then we can say we want none of your food going into landfill, we want it all, because we can say it, because you want that business. It's such an easy position to be in.
But it's a position that people have been maybe loath to take in the past, but maybe this is the change we need to make.
Yeah, I mean, loathed or just haven't got the resources or haven't thought about it. I typically don't find resistance more resources to think about it, or someone to do it for you, or is the audit tool really easy? So some of the things that we have in London, like the Good Food for London report, which Sustain produced in partnership with us at the GLA to look at how boroughs are performing, we use other indicators. So fair trade status is collected by someone else. Accredited living wage with the Living Wage Foundation is collected by someone else. So all we need to say is, can you provide evidence that you're a living wage employer? Can you provide evidence that who picks up your food waste? Just maybe
make
it
also
easy.
The food itself is not is healthy, it meets is healthy, sustainable, and so on.
You have to supply the menu. You have to tell us who your suppliers are.
Yeah.
Absolutely, show us your prices, all of those things. But once you have it, once it's kind of a practice, it becomes a lot easier. So when a park cafe goes out to be commissioned, when a leisure cafe and a leisure facility goes out, just it's that kind of change. And sometimes we know people aren't resourced enough to think about that, but what we need to do, maybe at London level or borough levels, is make it easy for anyone who's commissioning or procuring to have model documents to make it easy for them to do it.
Brilliant. Well, that does sound very exciting, and I'll watch with interest as to how London powers forward and leads the world.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.